Welcome back to our class on the book of Daniel. We've been going through this, and now we're in week 7. We looked at chapter 1 and saw how the youths were asking for seeds and water. They use an unusual vocabulary term there. Instead of vegetables, most translations, it's seeds, actually. It's an odd word. And that calls our attention to the fact that seeds and water are what God does with a new planting. I think that's kind of probably the idea there. In chapter 2, we have Nebuchadnezzar's great dream. It begins the Aramaic section, the language of the nations. It's about the future of the nations. We're looking at the nations now, not just Israel. So we use the language of empire and the nations. The kingdom of heaven comes and strikes the feet of this statue, and soon the kingdom of heaven will be at hand. So there's an interesting juxtaposition there. And then the big deal is that kid Daniel, who's in his late teens maybe, is set over the whole province of Babylon. And this is while Jerusalem is still standing. When you look at the timeline, it's an interesting deal that for the last couple of decades, actually, in Jerusalem's history, Daniel is at the right hand of Nebuchadnezzar. Should inform us how we think about what happens with Babylon and Jerusalem. So the 4 phases of the statue, we're going to see today that these correspond to the 4 beasts that Daniel sees in his vision in chapter 7, the lion, the bear, the leopard, and then the 4th beast, which is not characterized as a particular kind of beast. In chapter 3, the contest of worship, who leads worship. Chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar is humbled, made like a beast, and then is raised back up to his feet like a man, and he finally meets God. Then chapter 5 is the last night of the empire of Babylon. Persia is right outside the door. Belshazzar, who is having a feast and imploring the gods to help him, sees the handwriting on the wall. And then chapter 6, this is after Cyrus, who also called Darius, becomes emperor. Persia overthrows Babylon, and then of course the other functionaries in the empire conspire against Daniel and get him thrown in the lion's den. But the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be changed, there's a bigger law than that. Let's look at chapter 7 today. The lion, the bear, the whatever that is, and the other thing. We will see what these things are. We can review the timeline just a little bit here. We go to Daniel taken captive back in 605. Nebuchadnezzar's dream in chapter 2 probably happens in 603. The burning fiery furnace episode, maybe 600. Nebuchadnezzar's declension into a beast-like form happens in 593, and then there's a gap. Jerusalem is destroyed, Nebuchadnezzar dies, and we don't see anything else until the handwriting on the wall in 539, when Cyrus comes and conquers Babylon. We are in the midst of an Aramaic section. Daniel is in charge, although after Nebuchadnezzar dies, Daniel probably, his influence declines quite a bit. He's probably pushed off to the side and only brought out again when we have, when Cyrus comes and conquers. Daniel is exalted again and given a high position. Well, we went through the lions, and today we're going to then look at the lion, the bear, the leopard, and then the 4th beast. And this is in Belshazzar's. We'll look at the chronology there. And with Belshazzar's first year, we go back a little bit. See, we've gone from 539 when Cyrus conquers. Now we're going back to 543 because it says it's Belshazzar's first year. And Belshazzar's last year was 539 when Cyrus came and conquered. So Belshazzar's first year, we've got to run the tape backwards a little bit. So there's an interesting thing there. And all these last chapters, only the first 4 chapters happen when Daniel is relatively young, and all the rest of them happen after 50 years. Daniel is probably in his 80s or early 90s by this time. So here we go, chapter 7 of Daniel. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. And then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. And Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Okay, so we've gone back in time a bit. Belshazzar's first year is this vision in chapter 7, but his third year comes with Daniel's vision, and we'll look at next time in chapter 8. So we'll see his first year, we'll see his third year, but then we know that Belshazzar's last year was when he saw the handwriting on the wall back in chapter 5, which we know is 539. So there's a little bit of, we're jumping around in Belshazzar's timeline. And it would help if we knew exactly how long he reigned and what year his father Nebuchadnezzar promoted him and made him co-regent. And he began to be king in Babylon. And his first year has to be at least 3 years before his last year in 539. So what is it going to be, 543? Grandpa Nebuchadnezzar died back in 562. Daddy Nebuchadnezzar was next. So we don't know exactly how that first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, works. And I saw in my vision, behold, four winds of heaven were stirred up in the great sea. The sea in prophet speak is always not Israel. It's always the nations, all those others out there in the world. Since Israel's exile began, and now the world nations have a new role. The Gentile empires are now set up and appointed by God as kind of host or guardian nations of the Jews. Nebuchadnezzar is a good emperor. He's a head of gold. Darius Cyrus, he's the Messiah, according to Isaiah. He favors Daniel and decrees the return of the Jews. So the empires are shepherd caretakers, and not supposed to just view them as evil bad guys. They're doing God's appointed work. When an empire, though, begins to repress God's people, then that empire is replaced. And then I saw in my vision, behold, four winds of heaven. 4 is the world number. A lot of times when you see a 4, think about, okay, are we talking about north, south, east, and west? Are we talking about the 4 corners of the earth? 4 is kind of a world number. When the 4 winds of heaven are stirring up the great sea, then it's the wind or the spirit of heaven that is initiating this action. 4 great beasts come out of the sea, different from one another. We know that the lion with eagle's wings is going to be Babylon. Belshazzar is Babylon's last king, and he's on the verge of being replaced by the Medo-Persians under Darius and Cyrus. So the first was like a lion, these 4 beasts. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off. It was lifted from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of man was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard, had 4 wings of a bird on its back, and the beast had 4 heads. Dominion was given to it. So here we go. I'm not aware of anyone at this point in the chapter. Once we get into the prophecies of Daniel, we need to grant each other a lot of charitable give us some slack, okay? It's okay, because some people have got this figured out and they know exactly what this is and exactly how it maps into everything, and that's okay. I hold these things a little more loosely, and I want to be charitable with my brothers who differ, but so far in this chapter, everybody gets it. Everybody agrees that these 4 beasts correlate with Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. Lion is the head of gold, Babylon. And then it gives a little narration about that. We remember chapter 4 with Nebuchadnezzar being converted. He's converted to a man. He's made to stand. It says he's lifted from the ground and he's made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to him. So I think that's recalls Nebuchadnezzar's conversion. Then the second beast, the bear, chest and arms of silver. This is Medo-Persia. The leopard is the middle part of the statue. It's Greece. It's got 4 wings, 4 heads. That means it's worldwide. the number 4 again, the 4 winds of heaven and the 4 wings and heads of this leopard beast. It's got a much wider footprint and conquest than Babylon or Persia. And then the 4th beast that comes will be he's got iron legs. It's the feet, iron and feet of clay in the statue, and there's an iron mix in this one that recalls Rome. And again, though the point here is that God commands these empires. He tells them, "Arise." You know, there's a voice that commands. So arise, devour. Dominion was given to it. So that's probably the point to take home here. Now, after I saw in the visions of the night, behold, a 4th beast, terrifying, dreadful, exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it. It had 10 horns, and I considered the horns. And behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Okay, now it gets more interesting. Well, this is Rome. Everybody's with us so far, but from here on, we get lots of various interpretations, and interpreters have a lot of ideas about these things. And sometimes this is the end times and prophetic timetable has not yet happened, but I think we can see that I look at it a different way. So let's maintain charity toward all our good brothers who differ, though. I can't give you all the possibilities. This is not a survey of all the interpretive possibilities in Daniel. I'm just going to try to give you the one that I like. Okay. So my best understanding from what I've seen. Now, we're talking about the 4th beast. It's got great iron teeth. It recalls the the statue in chapter 2 with iron in the legs and feet. And then it has 10 horns. Now, later in this chapter, Daniel is told that these horns correspond to kings. I think it helps to see the 4 beasts as empires, which endure beyond the life of individual kings, not individual emperors involved here. But the 10 horns on this 4th beast, I think, are Roman emperors. There are 10 emperors between the first emperor and AD 70. So that's the way I think that's best to understand that. Now, it may also be that the horns, the king horns, these may not be specific individual kings. I want to prepare you for this now because I'm going to try to make a point of it later. I'm sympathetic to the idea that these 10 horns, or one of the horns, or the little horn especially, may be a family of kings, like the Herods, okay, including but not limited to Herod the Great. You're going to have Herod Antipas and the whole Herod family. And also, as the Herods are hand in glove working together with the high priests. So we're talking about a power, a horn, but it's manifested in more than one individual. Take it or leave it. That's the way I think that makes the most sense to me that way. The little horn is a subject of much comment, and many suggestions are made. Who is the little horn? Stay tuned. I'll tell you who it is. And then we interrupt this vision. So far, we've been looking at these beasts and this one and that one and what this one looks like. And now we kind of interrupt this vision of the earthly empires and kings and powers. And we look into heaven, where the real power above all powers is exercised. So now we see something, we move our eyes from the beasts on the earth, the world empires, up into the king of all kings in heaven. Verse 9, as I looked, thrones were placed. The Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, the hair of his head like pure wool, his throne fiery flames, its wheels burning fire. It recalls the vision that Ezekiel had. Ezekiel is Daniel's contemporary. He's also in exile. He sees flaming wheels within wheels when he sees his vision of God. Verse 10, a stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 thousands served him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. I looked then because of the sound of great words that the horn was speaking. And we're talking about the little horn, the last horn mentioned before. And I looked, and the beast was killed, its body destroyed, given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. So, okay, we're clearly in heaven now. Let's what can we agree on? What's easy here? It's easy to see that this is heaven. God is on the throne, and some want to be even more specific. This is God the Father on the throne, but others will say, when you think about it, there are indicators that this might be God the Son. It depends on how you want to think about it. So let's look at that. God the Son makes some sense because many other places in Scripture we get the idea that judgment is given to the Son. We will all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, and books are opened. And so if there's judgment and books, and we're standing before that throne, this might be God the Son. Hold that thought as a possibility here, and let's look at what else happens here. Now, this vision, when we're talking about the Ancient of Days, we're talking about the one who's on the throne, all that kind of stuff, and we want to say, well, this is the Father and this is the Son, blah, blah, blah. Well, we're Trinitarians, and we've we've had a lot more church history, a lot more theological input, a lot more scripture for us to look at. This vision doesn't really need to be any more specific, and it's a little bit vague, and it may be looking at things kind of through some smoke and from different sides, because it would, if this vision were any more specific, then it would begin to introduce Trinitarian distinctions that nobody cares about yet, nobody's thinking about yet. Nobody can see those things, and so it doesn't quite work to get. I think it works against the spirit of this vision to try to get much more specific about, which member of the Trinity are we talking about. All of God does what all of God does. So there are some, I want to resist that a little bit. Now, we're in heaven, but from heaven, we see and hear a clip of the action on earth. The beast was killed, its body destroyed, dominion was taken away, and this happens for a season and a time. Rome, or whatever constellation of world powers is in view here, is going to be destroyed. And once these things happen, then the world powers don't count anymore. Their dominion was taken away. We're going to have 4 world emperors, 4 world empires, and then the last one, the beast, is killed, and it's destroyed, and it's burned, and it's gone. His dominion is taken away. But their lives are prolonged for a season and a time. World powers don't count anymore. The real kingdom that comes during the time of the fourth empire, that's the real kingdom comes. And that's the one with the authority and power in Christ, who has all authority in heaven and on earth. The real power belongs to God and to his church. Who's the world empire now? The church. We're the ones who have been seated in the heavenlies with Christ, and we are with him as he exercises his authority in heaven and on earth. And the emperors, okay, they're prolonged for a season and time. Season and time. Now we begin to get lots of comment and many suggestions about possible connections with other scriptures and timetables from Revelation and those things. And I'm shy of doing that here. I suggest all we really need to see here is that these big empires, they just don't endure. They come, they go. They shine, they burn out. They're here, they're gone. They pass. They're a season and a time and no more, so don't worry about them. I think that's all that expression has to mean. It might mean more, and some people are convinced that it really does. I'm not. So God bless them. We love them. All right, let's go to verse 13. I saw in the night visions, behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. As for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the vision of my head alarmed me. So now we can see another thing. Now here we go, Son of Man. And when you see that Son of Man in the Old Testament, it's literally Ben Adam, son. Benjamin is son of the right hand. Ben. Okay, so Ben is the word for son, and then Adam is man. So this is son of Adam. Okay, so that is always interesting, always worth recalling. Okay, this is the son of man. This is the son of Adam. And when we see Son of Man, it usually refers to someone's human mortality, and that's how many New Testament scholars take Take it when Jesus calls him, continues to call himself the Son of Man, the Son of Man, the Son of Man. Well, for one thing, he's connecting himself with Adam. I'm the son of Adam. I'm the new Adam. I'm the next Adam. But then he's also connecting himself with humanity. Where I'm one of these. I'm one of the people that God created to people the earth and to rule the earth. So, Son of Man, there, a lot of stuff like that. Think also that Daniel's got a contemporary in exile, Ezekiel, and Ezekiel is addressed by God as Son of Man 103 times in the book of Ezekiel. So Daniel's readers would be familiar with that. And so wouldn't his first readers have said, Son of Man, Son of Man? They're not going to think about Jesus yet. They're going to think, oh, this is Ezekiel? Is this Ezekiel somehow? What? Son of somebody like the Son of Man goes to the Ancient of Days? What's Ezekiel doing in heaven? Those kind of questions might arise. And then when Jesus starts calling himself the Son of Man, what's the connection between Jesus and Ezekiel? Well, what about this? Both Ezekiel and Jesus were baptized or ordained about age 30, where they both have a vision of God's glory. Ezekiel with the vision that he sees at the beginning of his book with the wheels and the fiery chariot, and Jesus with the Spirit of God descending on him at his baptism. They both have a message of judgments coming to this generation. They both have a message that Jerusalem is going down. They both have a message that there's going to be a shakeup of all creation and all nations. They both have a message, though, of a new world and a new kingdom and a new Jerusalem. So there are some Son of Man similarities there. I don't know how far you can push that, but I don't think we want to just ignore it. Most, of course, ultimately see this as Jesus. Verse 13, this one comes like the Son of Man, and he comes and he receives everlasting dominion from the Father. Okay, we get that. But if Jesus is the Ancient of Days on the judgment throne, well, then one like the Son of Man, that might be Ezekiel, it would be the church, it would be God's chosen people, and they receive the kingdom. And so it works that way also here. Think about this. And also think, now, if this is Jesus, the Son of Man, coming on the clouds, and he's coming to the Father, the Ancient of Days, that's how it's often read here, then notice that this is not a picture of the second coming at the end of time, but it's a picture of Christ's triumphant ascension into heaven. When Jesus tells the scribes and Pharisees that you'll see, or tells the chief priest at his trial, and you'll see the Son of Man ascending on the clouds or coming on the clouds. He's not talking about his second coming. He's talking about, if he's referring to this Daniel chapter, at least part of the connection there is that you'll see evidence that Christ has ascended to heaven, that the Son of Man has gone to God's throne, where the Son of Man receives all authority in heaven and on earth, and where the Son of Man is now seated at the right hand of the Father. And you who try me and convict me today in this trial will see evidence of that. And I think the reference is then to Christ who sends the Romans to destroy Jerusalem, and all the Jews who've had a generation to hear the gospel and repent. Many have been added to the church, but those who harden themselves are destroyed. So that's also connected with Daniel 7, I think. Verse 16, I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this. And so he told me and made known to me the interpretation of the things. These four great beasts are four kings who shall arise out of the earth, but the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever. Okay, so look what's going on. So far in this book, Daniel has been the one, whenever there's a vision or a dream and nobody can get it, Daniel's the one you call to. He's the one who gives the interpretations. He's the one who understands dreams and visions. But in this case, Daniel can't get it. He doesn't know, and he needs a heavenly being to explain to him. And we've already seen that the four great beasts are four kings. We've seen that these beasts are empires, not necessarily individual kings. So Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. It's the same as the statue in chapter 2. And then verse 18, it's the saints of the Most High receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever. So let's think about this picture again, the Ancient of Days on the throne, the Son of Man comes to him in clouds. He receives the whatever. Is this Jesus ascending to the Father and receiving the kingdom? Or is it the church receiving the kingdom in the train, in the wake, as they go with Christ in his triumph? Or is Jesus receiving the kingdom and the saints in Christ are receiving it with him somehow? Or how do you view that? This is a nice puzzle of a prophecy, and it's real clear in large, but when you get down into the details, it's really fun to think about exactly how does that work and what might it mean. Verse 19, Daniel asks about the fourth beast. I desired to know the truth about the fourth beast. It was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, teeth of iron, claws of bronze, devoured and broken pieces and stamped what was left with his feet, about the 10 horns on his head, the other horn that came up before which 3 of them fell. That horn had eyes and a mouth that spoke great things that seemed greater than its companions. So we've got Daniel's point of inquiry here is I want to know three things in particular. What about the fourth beast? We know that's Rome. What about the 10 horns? And what about the little horn that comes up before it? So this is where interpreters have lots of suggestions, and I'm going to tell you mine. And as I looked, let's continue here for a minute. As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. And thus he said, as for the fourth beast, there shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth and trample it down and break it to pieces. So that's Rome, and that fits Rome very easily. 24, as for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings. He shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times of the law. They shall be given into his hand for times, and half a time. But the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away, to be consumed and destroyed to the end. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom. All dominions shall serve and obey him. And here's the end of the matter. So that's it. We draw the line, sum total. God has an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Well, we all know where this ends up, but what is this business about the 10 horns and then another horn and the 3 kings and the time and half a time? And this is where there are lots of suggestions, and I'll tell you. So I think the 10 horns there just happen to be 10 emperors of Rome. Between the first emperor, Julius Caesar, he's the first one who's an emperor. Before that, Rome was a republic of some kind. Then Julius Caesar becomes a Caesar. He becomes an emperor. And then every other Caesar in the list, Augustus Caesar, Tiberius Caesar, Gaius Caesar, who's also known as Caligula, Claudius Caesar, Nero Claudius Caesar, and then Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and Vespasian. And so that takes us down to 70, to the final destruction of the old world and the inauguration of the new world, the end of the temple, the end of the sanctuary people, the end of Israel. So those 10 horns, I think, complete the list and take us down to the end of the old world. Then we get this business, and of course, then remember too, Nero, who is in 64 AD, is the first emperor to persecute Christians. Before 64, during all the time of the composition of the New Testament, Rome wasn't persecuting anybody. Rome was benevolent. Rome was protecting. Every time Paul got arrested, the Romans stepped in and helped him. So Rome was not a bad guy until Nero, until after the New Testament is the last books are written. And then in the Jewish wars, in 64, the other thing that happened in 64 was that the temple was finished. Herod's temple, under construction. Finally, in 64, it's finished. So we get Rome beginning to persecute Christians. We get the temple finished, which causes a huge swell of nationalistic fervor among the Jews. And especially since there's some chaos in Rome, the Jews get more and more, hey, it's finally time for us to be independent again. They actually start rebelling in 66. And so there's wars. They're successful a little bit, but then Rome comes and squashes them in 70 and tears the whole place down. So during that time of great confusion and great persecution of the church, I think that's the tribulation. I think that's the horrible years when both Rome and the powers in Jerusalem were persecuting Christians. The absence of Roman control in Jerusalem resulted in terrible, unrestrained persecution of Jewish Christians. The Great Tribulation are in these years, the final destruction of Jerusalem, which is full of unspeakable horrors. It's one of the most grisly and horrifying sieges and that we have records of in the ancient world. So that's what's going on there. Now, who's the little horn? And I think I'll tell you. The little horn here is, I think, Herod or the Herods, or the Herods and the Jews who are in his orbit, the Herods. They got the power of 3 Roman emperors. Herod the Great convinced Augustus to give him the title of King of the Jews. And then Herod the Great is the one who murders the babies of Bethlehem, trying to kill Jesus. Then the second Herod, Herod Antipas, he gets his power. He's under he's persuaded and worked his way into the graces of Emperor Tiberius. And Antipas is the one who kills John the Baptist. Antipas is also the one that the crowds are all screaming, "We have no king but Caesar." And then the Herod Agrippa the first is the one who kills the Apostle James, and he's under the Emperor Claudius. So I think that another one who rises, and this is where you may be less convinced than other places, but another shall arise after them. He'll be different from the former ones. He'll put down 3 kings, and I think the word there for putting that down on this reading, we're going to say put down, has the sense of subdue. It describes the way the Herods persuaded emperors and talked their way in and worked their political power levers the best they could. And so the emperors and authorities let them do things their own way. So they put down 3 kings in the sense that it's not really Claudius in charge here. It's not really Tiberius in charge here. It's Herod and the Herods, and especially also then the way that the Jews and the Jews in power were working with Herod, and especially as they persecute the church. The Herods and the high priests do nothing but try to frustrate God's plan in Christ for the fullness of time. They try to kill baby Jesus. They try to trap Jesus, to convict him. They crucify him. They lie about the resurrection. They arrest the apostles. They lynch and they murder Paul. They want to murder Paul. All these things are during the time of Jesus, the times of the apostles, and the halftime of the Jewish war and the tribulation. How's that work? Okay, that's how I see it. Think about that. Of all the suggestions I've seen, this one seems to work better than any of them. So here we go. Some don't find this reading of the little horn as a conglomerate of Herods and high priests satisfying. That's okay. I personally am even less satisfied with many other suggestions. And someday there may be a better idea, and that's great. But so far, this is the best idea I've seen. So there it is. The dominion, and then after Jerusalem is destroyed in AD 70, don't miss this. We're in verse 27. There is no more Israel. There's no more sanctuary. There's no more sanctuary people. There's no further purpose for the beast empires to guard or to house God's people, because God's people aren't going to be housed in a place in a nation anymore. It's the Jew plus Gentile church. It's the new creation. It's worldwide. It's everywhere. In Christ, that church has been given the kingdom, which like leaven is going to grow and fill the whole lump, disciple nations, teach them to obey all that Christ has commanded. The verse 27 says, the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. Wow. Okay, I think I want us all to get to the end of Daniel 7 together, and all to affirm what Christ has done in his church and for his church. This is the changing of the world. This is how the world changes, and this is how the new creation comes. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me. My color changed, but I kept the matter in my heart. So he didn't write this down. This was in the first year of Belshazzar. We're going to get to the third year of Belshazzar in chapter 8, and we don't get to the last year of Belshazzar till back in chapter 6. So Daniel kept this for a while and didn't publish it right away. So there we go. That's the end. That's what you're going to get from me on chapter 7. I'm going to say no more, but I think I wanted to say at least that. And next week we will look at chapter 8, or next time